Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Ward, and I'm a volunteer with the Deschutes Land Trust, and I'm also a field biologist and a student here in Bend. And originally, I was going to be taking out some folks on a beginning birding walk, and obviously that got canceled. And so we're doing something a little different, which is share this video on some beginning birding basics and wanted to share a few things with you that are, again, they're just going to be some basic things to get you started, some fundamentals that I think will help you as you are out trying to learn more about the birds that we have both in our area but also around the country if you really get into it and become a fellow bird nerd. So I never used to think that I would be that interested in birds. I had a little bit of a conversion experience about 10 years ago volunteering with an organization in Big Sur, California called Ventana Wildlife Society. And I had the good fortune of getting to interact with California condors, which are still critically endangered. And that was kind of my conversion experience. And I started getting into learning about condors and also raptors and other kind of big dynamic birds that really attracted to me. But as time went by, I got more and more interested in other birds as well. And as I began to move into field biology, I needed to learn more about birds for work. And of course, my interest snowballed from there. So, as other people have said, part of why I think people love birds, and hopefully why you're interested in this video and learning more, is that birds, we can see them. They're all over the place. They fill virtually every niche that we can readily observe. They're on every continent. They're beautiful oftentimes. They have complex social behaviors. They're pretty interesting critters, and they can fly. I think they capture our imagination in a lot of ways. So those are a couple of things why I'm really interested in birds. Probably the other main thing is that by spending time learning about birds, I'm also learning about the general ecology of the place where I live or I'm visiting, and it's just a great way to interact with the environment and learn more about the ecology of a place. So, let's dive in. First is, other than your own senses and your own mind, a couple of the tools that will be most important, of course, to see and learn birds are field guides and binoculars. So I've got a lot of field guides. I've got just four out of the many. I've got a Peterson guide, Roger Tory Peterson, famous ornithologist artist, who kind of revolutionized field guides. I've got a Nest Eggs and Nestlings of North American birds. And then I've got two other ones that I have here as examples, which are two of my favorite ones. This is Crosley's ID Guide for Raptors of North America, which I really like. And the one that I use the most, though, is the Sibley Guide, David Allen Sibley. This is the second edition. And what I like about the Sibley Guide is that, I love David Allen Sibley's paintings. I like the way he has his layout of his birds. He's got overview pages, which I think are really helpful. Here's an overview of diurnal raptors. So it shows you all the birds in a section, and that's a nice reference page when you're kind of learning, and I still use it all the time. The thing with field guides is that every field guide is going to offer you something a little bit different, even if they cover the same geographic area. Each author, publishing house, what have you, they're going to have just slightly different information. The paintings or photographs are going to be different. So it is practical to have multiple field guides if you want to cross-reference, and I think that's worthwhile. I like field guides that have paintings as opposed to photographs. I think National Geographic has their birds are photographed. What I prefer about the paintings is that they give you an idealized reference for what a bird should look like in perfect light if it was in hand, which it probably wouldn't. Whereas with photographs, it can be really difficult to capture all the colors, the way that the plumage changes over the course of a bird's body. Um, One exception to that is the Crosley guide. And real quick, what I like about this guide is even though he uses photographs, um, they're they're really, the photography is fantastic, and he sets the photographs of the birds in the environment that you would see it, and I think that's just a really great way um, to kind of learn more about where you would see these raptors. And what's also really cool about this guide is he has these quiz pages, and if you can make out, there's a little number right there. So, this page wants you to figure out about if these are rough-legged hawks. Basically, you can take a quiz. You can quiz yourself to see, test your knowledge, and there's a key in the back. So Crosley's is a great guide, and there's extensive species accounts as well in the back. So, but overall, I like having the paintings because I think that it helps you learn those birds better. Also, of course, I also have bought the Sibley app for my phone, which I like because I can utilize the bird calls. There are free apps out there. Merlin ID app is free. I think the Audubon bird app is free, and there's other ones as well, such as iBird. So those are good tools, and again, you get something different. I use my Sibley phone app bird guide primarily for calls and things like that, songs, if I need to reference that. So definitely good tools to have. I'd say if you're just starting out, you can probably find a used field guide at the bookstore, online, or even at the library. And try to get the latest edition because the taxonomy and names of birds changes and how they're arranged. And some older guides still are useful. They're still useful, but having the updated information is good. All right, on to binoculars. My binoculars that I have are Eagle Optics, and they're no longer in business, unfortunately. If you ever see a used pair of these, I'd say get them. And I have 10 by 42 binoculars. That's the magnification along with kind of aspect of the optics. There's a lot of videos about how to choose, videos and articles about how to choose the right pair of binoculars. They range in price from tens of dollars to thousands. And I'll just quickly say for binoculars, I think that if you can afford $150 to a $300 pair of binoculars, you won't regret it. They're a good investment and they'll last a long time. The quality should be pretty good. And for general birding, the power, an 8 power by 40 or 42 to 10, which is what I have, 10 by 42. 8 to 10 power I think is going to be sufficient for what you want, and I wouldn't go any lower than that. And any higher than that, like for a scope, you'd want a tripod. So if you can afford a good pair of binoculars, I'd say it's a worthwhile investment that you'll probably use for other things as well, or resell. While we're on the subject of binoculars, they can be a little bit tricky sometimes to find birds, especially small birds that are moving around a lot that might be further off up in a tree or a bush. And the simple trick with binoculars, if you're having a hard time finding the bird that you see with your naked eye, is to, this is going to be a little goofy, find the bird and kind of lock your gaze on where it's at. Let's say it's on the third branch from the from the top of the tree. So keep your head and your gaze there, and just bring your binoculars straight to your eyes like that, and then you can focus. If you bring up like this and are trying to find it, I'm exaggerating, but it's going to be it's going to be tricky. So again, keep your eyes locked on your target, and then bring them straight up like that. Okay, so that's the bit on binoculars. Finding birds sounds rather simple. That's the great thing about birding, is you can just go outside your front yard and you're probably going to see some birds. But depending on how many birds you want to see, the species diversity, maybe you want to see a more rare bird or a certain type of bird or something other than a raven and a Steller's jay, which was probably right outside your door right now. It can be helpful to kind of have an idea of how to find certain birds. So the things to think about, I think, are time of year, which right now it's spring, excellent time to see both local resident birds and birds that are migrating through, that are passing through our area, but also migrating to our area. So time of year, time of day. So morning, oftentimes you probably heard the morning song or the dawn chorus or dawn song, where birds, usually males, but females also are vocal, but usually males are singing in the mornings, establishing their territories and attracting mates. So time of day, morning or evening, you'll hear birds and see birds throughout the day, but really active in the morning and then some at night as well, depending on the species. And then habitat. Where are you? Are you in town, or are you down by the river, in a canyon, in a coniferous forest, up maybe by the Three Sisters? Maybe you're out in a sage brush steppe or juniper woodland. So where you're at can determine the species that you will see, the species diversity or species richness, and also just how many birds, how abundant are they in general in that area. So as I said, spring right now, excellent time to be out birding in the morning. I was actually at Drake Park this morning, and I saw right around 30 species that I either saw or heard. I was out there at 6:45, and by 9:30, it definitely died down quite a bit as far as the activity, the singing, and whatnot. So getting out in the morning, even though it's cold, is a great time. Spring is a great time. If you can get yourself close to water, especially being that we live in the arid West, you'll see birds out in the desert, of course, but by water, you will increase your chance to see a higher diversity of species. And I don't want to dismiss town either, because as I said, I was at Drake Park, and there's a lot of there's shrubs, there's willows, red osier dogwood, of course, the ever-present juniper and ponderosa pine. But in Drake Park, there's aspen, there's locust, there's maple, there's a bunch of other planted trees that people have in their yards. So it's a good place to, and then there's the river, of course, as well, to see birds. All right, so identifying birds. How do we identify birds, Ben? Oh, good question. Also, might seem a little bit obvious, but there's a few things that will help you figure out birds that both you know and you don't know, and kind of this is how I tend to look at them, especially if I don't know a bird. So a good thing to do, and actually this is a good practice with birds you do know, say a robin or a Steller's jay, or even a raven, is to start at the head. And again, this is if you have a good view of a bird. So start at the head, specifically at the beak, and notice the shape, the color, the length of the beak in relation to the head. Is it sharp, pointy, and long? Is it short and fine? Is it really big and triangular like a grosbeak or a finch? So try to notice what that beak is like, and then work your way back up to the head And are there, is the head all one color? What color is it? Does it have an eye ring? Does it have an eye stripe, which goes from, kind of the nostril of the beak, if you will, through the eye? That's an eye stripe. Does it have an eyebrow? A lot of times, like Bewick's wren has a really distinct white eyebrow. Several birds do. Does it have different colored cheeks? Does it have a crest? Like Steller's jay has a crest. Hooded merganser has a really fantastic feather crest. If you've ever seen a male or a drake hooded merganser, very beautiful. And then keep working your way back down the body. Notice the shape, the proportion of things, and the more that you do that, the better you'll get at recognizing distinct patterns. And that goes all the way down the wings, both in the back, the shoulder blades, the tail. Is the tail forked? Is it flat? Is it rounded? Is it square shaped? For example, distinguishing between a raven and a common raven and an American crow, they're really similar, but a crow has a more square shaped tail and is smaller overall. And a raven has a wedge-shaped tail with a much more a larger beak, and their call is different as well. So as far as the body is concerned, and looking at birds, if you have a good look, start with the head and beak. At least that's what I do, and I work my way down the entire body. Getting a call. Sorry about that. Okay. So other useful clues are, of course, size. For birds that are similar to each other, like crows and ravens, different types of hawks, sharp-shinned hawks, Cooper's hawks, some of the ducks that are similar, and some of those size differences can be really nuanced and kind of distinct, or not distinct. They're nuanced. They're small, but that can be something that helps you, especially as you learn more about birds and start seeing more. You see, oh, that one is smaller, or that can be a helpful clue. Song and calls can be a little bit overwhelming when you're first learning about birds, but what I recommend is learning some of the birds that you do know. And there's a lot of tools. If you search Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a good call library that's free. Some of your bird apps will have, if they're free, they should have they should have the common calls and songs, representative songs of the common species. So start listening to some of those, or if you see a bird that pay attention to its calls and songs. What does it sound like, and what does it sound like during different times of the year? And the world of bird vocalizations is vast and deep and complex and has a lot of variety. I'm still learning every day practically. I'm like, oh, there's a call that I haven't heard before. But some birds, like vireos, some of the vireos are really hard to distinguish from each other, and some of them you just distinguish by voice. And also, range is another really useful tool for figuring out, is this a bird that I should be seeing right now, or is it something else? And you get out your range map, and I've got a bookmark here of some sapsuckers. I've got several bookmarks, so that probably wasn't very smart. Okay, so let's say you're like, hey, I saw a sapsucker, and I think it was a yellow-bellied sapsucker. And you get your field guide out, and you see, well, I just happen to know that this bird is more, it occurs back east. But it looks really similar to the red-naped sapsucker, which we do have out here. And so, but you can see that these birds, while they are distinct, they're pretty similar. And sometimes in the field, when you only catch a flash of a bird, and you recognize it, this can help you distinguish, oh, okay, probably wasn't a yellow-bellied sapsucker, it's probably a red-naped sapsucker. That being said, with range maps, is birds can fly, and as others have said, they don't read range maps. And birds are known to show up, they're called vagrants, when they show up outside of their normal range. So be aware that while there's the general rule, there's always exceptions to that rule, exceptions to what the norm is. And I'd also say that we live in a dynamic world with a changing environment, and humans have had a lot of big impact on our environment. And as we continue to expand, certain birds have expanded with us, especially the corvids, so crows, ravens, jays, magpies, and some of those birds like the western scrub jay, which is now no longer the western scrub jay, it's either the California scrub jay or Woodhouse's scrub jay. That's a bird that has expanded as well. And I'm not from Bend, but I'm told that in the past the scrub jay was relatively rare here in Bend, and now it's very common. So range maps are a useful tool, but don't depend on them as a singular source of identification, but definitely helpful. Also keep in mind, males and females can be pretty different. They can be different size, they can have different plumage and coloration, which you probably already know. But that can make identification tricky, so bear that in mind. And then also fall migrants and juveniles can have slightly different plumages as well. So that's why it's great to have a field guide, and especially a book, because you just have all the information right there in front of you. Oh, I forgot to mention, as far as identifying birds by sight, if you don't get a good look at them and you don't have the time to, look at the whole body and the beak and all the colors, look for identifying features such as wing patches or anything that stands out to you. And if I'm with somebody and I see a bird I don't know, a lot of times, like if I'm with my wife, Beth, I'll look at the bird and maybe she's looking at the field guide, and I'll be describing out loud what that bird looks like. Well, it's got a bluish beak, and it's got a dark band right through the middle, and it's a short beak, and so forth. And that kind of helps remember, and take note of what some of the distinguishing features are before it flies off, so that you can look it up later. A field notebook is excellent for that as well. If there's a bird that I don't know, I'll write down some of the features, so that because even though I think I'll remember, a lot of times I don't. And I'll take notes too on how the call and song, the vocalizations of the bird sound, and what some of the mnemonics are for that. And that can be helpful, so that you can reference it later on. Getting out with a knowledgeable birder is probably one of the best ways that you can learn about other birds. And if you don't already know somebody and you're locked in your house right now or on your property, that's going to be a little challenging for the time being. But once things get back up and running, then that's something that I definitely recommend you do, is try to meet with somebody who can take you around and show you and help you learn what those birds are. A birding mentor, if you will, on your path to bird knowledgeness. All right, so a couple other notes. One is patience, and not just in the learning process of seeing a lot of birds that you don't know, but even just in the act of birding. Birds move around a lot, and especially small birds or even larger birds can be obscured by cover of a tree or a bush or distance, and they're going to move around on you. So I always say, stick with it. If you can still see movement in your binoculars, even if you can't see the bird but you can tell it hasn't moved out of your range of view, a lot of times I'll just keep my binoculars up until I either see that bird move out of view, or oftentimes that bird will pop back up into view, and you can get a good idea on it that way. So be patient with those birds. They're gonna dip in and out of view, and you just have to kind of stick with it. It's probably more rare that you see a bird and it is just on a perch for minutes and minutes at a time, which it does happen. Absolutely happens. One time I watched an American kestrel sit on top of a juniper tree at the COCC campus for, it was like 45 minutes just hanging out. So not always the case, but birds are going to move in and out, so just stick with them. I like to walk with bird speed in mind, so I'm walking slowly. I have my eyes and ears open. I'm always listening for, of course, songs, the vocalizations of birds, calls, and things like that. But I'm also listening for scratching on the ground, sparrows, a lot of times, or quail. You can hear them, running around in the brush. I'm listening for just activity in general, drumming in the case of woodpeckers, sapsuckers, nuthatches, rustling of leaves. I'm always listening for those types of cues because usually there's a bird around and you can also hear them fairly well. Also, if you hear lots of chattering and arguing, if you will, that's a good sign that there's probably some bird activity, and pay attention to that because you might see something pretty neat. Also, things that I'm looking for are other than looking for birds is shadows, darting, birds coming in and out. I've found birds. I've looked in a tree actually just across my fence here. I was looking out my window and I happened to see these feathers ruffling around in the wind, and I wasn't sure that it was a bird, but I stuck my bins up on it and it was gray horned owl. So your eye is really good at picking up movement, and as you practice looking for birds, you'll see and be able to identify specific bird movement, including just feathers in a tree, even if you can't really see that bird with the naked eye. Let's see. There's an author named John Young who wrote a book called What the Robin Knows. It's an excellent book. Definitely recommend it. He talks about having what he calls a sit spot, where somewhere close to your house that you can come out on a regular basis, preferably in the mornings, and you sit in that sit spot with coffee, tea, binoculars, notebook, what have you, for at least 20 minutes. And that gives you a chance to become more aware of your environments and to kind of get into almost a meditative state of looking and listening. It also gives birds who might be spooked by you a little bit a chance to acclimate to your presence and kind of start returning to their regular behavior. I forgot to mention with walking bird speed too is that when you walk slower, not only do you see more, but you're less likely to flush birds that would be spooked by your presence, and so it gives you a better chance to get a little bit closer and to see more undisturbed behavior. So that's another reason for walking slow. Having a feeder is a great way, of course, to see birds come into your yard and get close to them, and also provide a little bit of food. There's all sorts of debates out there about whether or not having a bird feeder is something that is good, and I'll let you foray into that on your own if you're interested. Just be prepared for some battles. And keeping a house bird list is just a fun thing. We have one here at our place specifically for the house of just birds we see, and over the years it's fun to see what kinds of birds you show up and fly by and whatnot. And the last thing I'd say is with your field guide. This is back to the field guide. They should have a introduction, and I try to read the introduction once a year because there's always something that I either didn't notice before or I've forgotten, something that I can glean or pick up, and it's just a great place to start with your field guide. I think it kind of gets overlooked a little bit because it's small, dense writing as you can see. But there's a lot of great information, and especially if you're just starting out, there's some good ethics of birding, and like with playback calls, there's a good bit in there, with Sibley's guide at least. And then there's also, as you get into it, as you get into birds, there's these parts of the bird pages, and it shows you what all the feathers are and what the technical terms are. Like eyebrow is also known as the supercilium. So your field guide is a great reference for just reading and thinking more about how you can bird. So again, I'm Ben with the Deschutes Land Trust. Thanks for uh, tuning in. If you made it this far, I congratulate you. It means that you will be able to see lots of birds, and I hope you do. It's a good time to be out. Okay, have a great day.